Why, hello. This is John Huey and my co-host Michael Tingley,
Hello.
and we are here on the Sober Atheist podcast, obviously. And we've arrived at episode 25, which is another
Wow.
auspicious number. We're actually starting to roll up some more numbers here, even though we're not as speedy as your average 25-year-old podcaster. We make our own attempt, given our limitations, to keep up with this interesting project we embarked upon, and I think we're moving right along, right, Michael? It seems
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
we're moving along. We're there. We're here for the duration, which is we don't know what the
Yeah.
duration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fast.
Oh God!
It's
Oh
fast.
God!
It's
Oh God!
fast approaching, isn't it?
Yeah, okay, but we're here at episode 25, and we're going to see how this one evolves. We got some ideas jotted down on both ends about this thing, but this episode is entitled "How Does Living Our Best Lives as Atheists Enhance Our Sobriety?" All right, we're not talking about a better life than someone else. We're talking about our best life, not your best life or your grandma's best life or some person in another kind of group's best life. It's our best life, which we're going to try to elucidate a few concepts and ideas from. And in the sense of a best life, in my terms, I think that living an honest life in the real world, as opposed to a world based on fantasy, enables our critical faculties to access our situation more accurately as those situations evolve as sober people. We rely on no outside power source of or guidance other than what we develop on our own in light of what we see in real time in a real world. And we're going to try to sort of explain some of that a little bit as we go along in this episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me stop you there because I have one question right in that first
Certainly.
sentence. The idea of a source of guidance. I kind of think you're referring to the supernatural source of guidance
Right.
or a belief,
Right.
an irrational belief, because we do obviously have sources of guidance we have had most of our lives, and we
Sure.
continue to have
Sure.
guidance from everything that we're
Sure.
exposed to.
Sure.
Yeah,
Uh, I think I told the story once about my mom uh, encountering me when I was stealing something and told me to walk up and tell the person who I'd stole the thing from that I was a thief. Okay. That was old school. That was old 50s style parenting, but it made a real impression upon me.
I'm sure.
Okay. It wasn't, that was something that happened in real time in the real world that made an impression upon me.
Mhm.
And she turned around and looked at me and put that finger in my face and said, people in our family are not thieves. We don't steal from anyone. Boom. Okay.
That's guidance for you.
That
That's some
was
guidance.
guidance. That was from on high too, because she was at the time I was like 7 or 8, and she was a grown adult. So that was like, you know. Now I'm sure she'd heard that stuff in the Magyar Church of Calvin, which is the very severe Calvinist religious Hungarian tradition as a first generation, second generation, born in the United States person. But that's not what I heard. I heard her tell me that. All right. And I incorporated that into my view of life. Right.
Sure.
And I try to think that I've never really been a thief because, we don't do that. All right. That's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
bad.
right, right.
That was bad form of guidance, but it had nothing to do with fear of someone sitting on my shoulder or looking over my shoulder, except maybe my mother's voice. But, that was a practical, because I had a practical consequence in the real world that I incorporated into my view and
Yeah,
my lifetime view and behavior. All
right.
right, we learn from experience. Now, some people would say that's a negative way of parenting. I'm sure these days they say, "Oh, you're going to give the little boy a complex." Well, probably, if I really wanted to delve into the all the aspects of that, I could probably come up with something. But we're self actualizing as atheists, not as people who are taking directions from some force field or power that has no basis. And this is us talking, right? I mean, whatever
Yeah,
they say,
yeah,
it has no basis in fact. It has no basis in the real world, in the world of, science, mathematics, physics, geometry,
yeah, yeah,
medicine, all the things we do in fact believe in. Uh, and that's a good thing because as atheists in recovery, we have to use the observable world to help us on the path to that one magic word. There's only one magic word I think we've ever shared with each other. Well, there may be a couple at the end of the podcast we share, which
yeah,
have
yeah,
some magical properties. But what's the real magical property is that word abstinence. All right. To get to abstinence, we take the observations that we have made
mhm,
of the real world in real time,
yeah,
of the activities of ourselves and others,
yeah,
and we incorporate that into the essence of sobriety, which is the decision we made to stop drinking, reinforced with concepts and ideas that we've developed regarding the word abstinence and how important that word is to us.
yeah. We simply use a scientific method as opposed to a mystical, magical method.
Correct. Okay. And I think, considering the results of abstinence, and I think we can both safely say we've had pretty good results in some what are now fairly long lives, uh, adhering to that and incorporating that we've got some empirical evidence that, coming up with a self directed set of ideas and concepts that reinforce that word is a good thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And we didn't get it from someplace else. And that must mean that we're atheists,
yeah,
right? Because if we weren't atheists, we'd have to find a source of that someplace else, right? Somewhere in the, maybe the biblical world or, somewhere in the world of moral instruction or in the old style phrase of that Oxford group that later evolved into something called moral rearmament.
hmm,
Okay. You have to, you know,
mhm,
morally rearm ourselves with concepts and ideas outside of us. Okay. Back to the thing with the stealing, it may have been written down in a book somewhere about stealing, but I saw the real world come down on me like a
yeah, yeah,
fucking ton of proverbial bricks,
yeah,
okay?
yeah.
When I got caught stealing, and I didn't steal no more after that. I didn't do it again because it made a deep, lasting impression upon me.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
those lessons teach us through trial and error. I mean,
Yeah. Well, trial and error where,
we push the limits to see how far you can go,
right,
and then
right,
boom, it hits you in the face, and then you
right,
take a different
right,
route.
right. And sometimes stuff takes a long time to hit you in the face,
Yeah, yeah,
like the many years from age 25 to age 38 when I knew every day that I was an alcoholic and that alcohol was having a terrible effect on my life before making a real decision and quitting. All right. I've gone over and over that in my head many times.
Well,
And you'll have,
there's a lack of clarity when you're under the influence. That
well,
it's easy to miss. It's easy to miss the signs.
it's easy to self justify
Yeah,
to the point where your bad behavior becomes justified
yeah, yeah,
in your mind because your judgment is so clouded and obscured by the substance or the substances you are using. You can justify anything to sort of reinforce your uh, negative behaviors.
yeah, yeah.
And those behaviors don't get unraveled until you've gotten to the point where you have to make that, for us, proverbial decision to stop. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Um, it's like we define our lives for ourselves, not on what it would or could be if we only subscribe to the idea of the care and guidance of some outside power. This is not an easy road we're on here, this atheism thing. All right. Uh, if we weren't on this atheism road, we could go to this uh, would or could if only uh, it was, I think they use the word thought on, whatever, would or could, right?
Yeah,
Uh, Bullshit. All right. We can't say would or could. We say, now that I made this decision, I can, because I don't want the negative consequences of what brought me to that day of decision. Now, it's a definite conundrum for giant numbers of people who decide over and over again to quit, but don't. And what separates those of us that stop from the ones that don't, that's the subject of another mysterious uh, podcast, which I keep promising to work on month in and month out, that we'll talk about some other time. But what I'm absolutely firm and positive about is there has been no guidance from an outside power in the 39, almost 39 years I've been doing this. And just weeks away from 20 years for you, right, Michael?
yeah, yeah. 19.8.
19.8, how precise, how scientific, okay? And have you seen any outside powers come down and have you seen any bright lights recently?
No, and for years I had open arms waiting for that to happen, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
gave it a try, and yeah, I came to the same conclusion you did, that it
Well,
wasn't going to happen, and it was up to me. I got to figure this shit out.
I guess I've always had contempt prior to investigation of that,
Yeah, yeah,
even though I've read virtually everything there is to read that I can read and get through. It's commonly available in the English language about that. I understand those ideas fairly well. And there is some symmetry in this sort of vague idea of a power that works in your lives with magical results. There's some sort of, you can create some beautiful things from, erroneous ideas. William Blake is a writer of great beauty and profound insight in some of the language and ideas that he uses, but he walked around in a total fantasy world. I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
to the point where he actually had audible and visual hallucinations. He had some other, issues. Uh, but people that are like poetic heroes of mine, like Gerard Manley Hopkins, the language is beautiful, uh, but the uh, ideas of a Jesuit priest are not to me. All right. The fundamental theological ideas, but the results of what that Jesuit priest did on the printed page are often quite beautiful, even if the topics and the essence of some of the stuff is, I see, it's like, some fantasy and science fiction, if it's really done well, can be very, sort of lead you to some profound insights into
sure.
what is really going on,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So I've got nothing against those people as people, but I'm not going to use something I know to be fanciful to guide my life, okay? Because there is, in my mind, all right, there is strength, considerable strength, internal strength in defining the world for yourself, right? Without the substance in you skewing your perceptions about what you're seeing and what you're thinking. Once you remove the substance from your system, presuming you don't have an underlying psychiatric condition that causes you to hallucinate or engage in paranoid delusions or fantasies or any of the other, sort of pathologies you can pick out of the diagnostic manual of the American Psychiatric Association. I'm not holding myself up as somebody that really has got his fingers around that, but or hands around that. But assuming that you don't have a diagnosable mental health condition that obscures your perceptions, I found that once I took the alcohol out of my system, my ability to see in the light of the real world was greatly enhanced.
Oh, yeah, the clarity was obvious. Yeah, obvious.
Right. And the fact that we did it, I can't say I did it on my own totally, because I did go to groups and associate with people who were very helpful to me
Oh,
one
sure.
on one,
Yeah, yeah. I
as
mean,
you've done over the
yeah,
years.
yeah. I mean, there's a certain amount of practical guidance from other people
Oh,
and from their
yeah, yeah,
experience as well. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
very valuable.
We were at a unaffiliated meeting today where we heard people sharing their uh, uh, various aspects of their life in the light of their real world experience. And I'm still learning from what people are going through
Yeah. Oh,
in
yeah.
that context.
And still inspired by it too. I mean,
Right. It's
inspired to
not,
continue
no,
learning. Yeah.
people gathering together as like minded individuals and learning from one another is never a bad thing as long as everybody engaged with it is doing it with good intentions.
Yeah.
As long as you're with reasonable, good intentioned people who know something about the issues and problems you're discussing, you will learn from them. That part of the model is valid. What isn't valid is thinking that there's something else in the room, or these days, something else in the wires or in the air or whatever, uh, between us. Because no, it's just us.
Just us. Yep. I
And
like
well,
that.
it is.
I
It's
like that.
just us, right? And
Yeah.
what a relief that is.
Well,
That's
yeah, and, eventually you'll get to that word freedom too. I mean,
yeah.
that's where we experience a certain amount of freedom.
Well, and also responsibility, because the ability to
Yeah, yeah,
self define means that the results you get are intimately, totally linked to your own ideas and actions in the real world. All
Yeah.
right. I'm not saying that, every sober person always gets consistently positive results. I certainly haven't. I made mistakes in a marriage that didn't work until I found myself in a marriage that has worked
Yeah.
for over
Yeah.
19 and a half years. But there's I had at least I had one marriage in recovery that didn't work based on a lot of, erroneous assumptions I made about the nature of that particular relationship. And, my own actions and inactions during that time, during the course of that. It wasn't a one sided thing. There are two parties involved. But at least I can look back and say that, well, it wasn't part of God's plan. It was a part of my fuck up. Okay.
Yeah, taking responsibility for your actions and your lessons along the way is very important to
Right.
recognize you're responsible. We are responsible.
Absolutely. And I've heard that phrase before, but it's used spun in a different way.
Yes, it
Okay.
is. It's
I think
spun in a
it's
different
spun.
way.
They spin it. They've always got to, they've always got to have, I love this shit, even in these secular places, they've always got to have what they call, oh, what about the spiritual component? Okay. I said, well, there's only one problem with your fucking spiritual component. It's not real. It doesn't exist. It's not in the real world. It's something that was made up. It's something that you conjured up that you believe, like, the dragons in Game of Thrones. I love the dragons in Game of Thrones. I wish they were real, but I know that people don't ride dragons in the real world, and they never have. And they never will, because the dragon's going to turn around and fucking eat you. Okay. So, I mean, yeah, for one, for openers, if it was a real dragon, what would it do with you? It just, but they, the
Yeah.
dragons love you because there's this spiritual component that goes between the human and da, da, da. No, dragons aren't doggies. All right. Dragons are vicious creatures, mythical creatures that breathe fire and roast people like hot dogs. So, you know, we don't exist in the Game of Thrones universe in real time. Okay. We can enjoy it, we can watch it, and we can be greatly entertained and edified by it, because there are some human truths that are definitely in that universe that we can relate to, and human characters and attitudes and actions we can relate to.
Right.
But we don't believe in dragons. Okay. We don't believe in witches coming up out of the ground, or fairies hidden in trees, or we don't. Okay. And that's a good thing. Um, because in the end, there are no outside values or forces to let us down long term. Our values are formed by us in the light of our experiences. There is, in fact, for the atheist, far less to be disappointed about in a world that is filled with actual, tangible disappointments. Imagine how disappointed you would be, Michael, if you were going into one of those churches every morning for a ceremony, or whatever they call it, at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever the first time. I see them walking into these places, right? On Ash
You can
Wednesday.
go to mass every day if you want
Yeah,
to.
well, yeah, you go, yeah, and and you're going there and you're praying and you're praying and praying and praying and praying for some result, and you know, it doesn't happen. That would be devastating, because you would tend to believe that your prayers were not answered because of some deficit in you, Would you not that you're not worthy? They always say, I'm not worthy, Lord, and stuff like that. I'm not
Right.
worthy of that. Okay? We don't have any of that shit
Or
with
you
the
didn't
word.
pray hard enough. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't pray hard
But
enough.
I
Or
need to ask you for examples. When you say there are no outside values or forces, what what exactly are you referring to?
we don't read the Torah, okay, and follow it word for word like an Orthodox member of that
But
religion
some of the
does.
values
There
within
are
that
something, of course, there are things of
are
value in
things that
that.
we
You're
relate
not
to
you're
and
supposed to be charitable to
help
others.
us
You're
survive.
right.
Yeah,
You're
you know.
supposed to not murder people. You're supposed to, but natural law takes care of a lot of that without any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Now there are values that come through, but you're not being directed by an outside entity as represented in, well, there's one of those books that says if you murder people, you're going to go to heaven and get 72 virgins as a reward for murdering people who've offended the eye of God.
Right,
Okay.
right, right.
And that other thing where they say you can like that famous scene in The Godfather where Michael Corleone is having the baby baptized and the holy waters coming down and all of that stuff. And exactly at that moment, all of those people are going out. Remember shooting the guy in the eye in Las Vegas on the massage table, boom, in the eye, you know, justifying a life that really is despicable and unsupportable in any way using what they call faith. All right. That's a whole other sort of offshoot of the topic, which that's a
Yes.
rabbit hole we could go down, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, by you know, burning people up in the Middle Ages and for being heretics and chasing my ancestors out of France because they didn't worship in the Catholic Church, the Huguenots being burnt at the stake in the villages in France, and they were all running away. A bunch of those people were my ancestors, came here in the 1680s, running away from that. Not all of that stuff, just on the practical day-to-day level of human aspiration and disappointment without any of this theatricality of the sins of the past and all of that
Mm,
stuff,
mm.
putting people to the sword and all that crap. Well, these people wander around thinking that there are answered prayers. Okay, that things that happen in their life are given from somewhere else, not the results of their actions and the physical actions of others in the real world. All right. We can be disappointed in outcomes. I was certainly disappointed in the outcome of the American election last November, profoundly disappointed. And even more shocked and disappointed by what I've seen since uh, January 20th here in DC, which is where I'm on my end of this thing. It's just a few miles from the White House.
Yeah. Speaking of a lack of values,
A lack of that, yeah. But
eesh.
I see them on the screen every day with that cross hanging around the neck, justifying the most hideous
Yeah.
and drastic and you know well, I use the word criminal, but
Well,
certainly not
intentional harm. Intentional harm.
intentional harm. And we see that result, but in our own lives we look to what, and to go from that macro view where of course we're talking about hypocrisy and, well, not to mention the bad taste. The bad taste is almost as bad as the bad actions. There their execrable taste in everything. It just, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't. I don't want to get started on that. I'll sound like a fucking elitist. I don't want to sound like an elitist on the podcast. Definitely not. But what I do want to sound like and do want to make people understand is that there's a great deal of personal satisfaction in living a life where many of the results that occur in your life are attributable to actions and activities that you do in fact understand from yourself and others. I can't imagine how anybody could say, well, that was God's will. That I can't, that's so alien to my way of thinking and my worldview. I can't really incorporate that. Could you, Michael? I can,
Well,
what?
no, it's a total denial of the truth. I mean, yeah, yeah, it does not compute. Uh,
Right. Okay, but let's not get away. We can't sugarcoat it. We're not our lives are not all roses and moonbeams. All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
There are some days seeing the disappointments and activities in the world that it can be hard to get up. It can be hard to get moving. It can be hard to function at all sometimes because of what you're seeing and feeling and seeing in the lives of people around you. Like here in DC, I can't tell you the number of people I met who've been one way or another laid off or devastated by these new activities here and what that means in their personal lives. Those are events on the macro scale that I cannot directly control. But if I thought that some outside force had something to do with that, I would be, I don't know what I would be. I think I'd be even, I think I'd be out of my,
Well,
I'd
yeah,
be crazy.
the sense of hopelessness would be
Yeah.
unbearable. I
Yeah.
mean, we
God let
there's
me down.
there's got
No,
to be something,
no,
some sense of
God,
hope to find
no,
somewhere. But if
no.
yeah,
God didn't let me down. It was 73 million semi-literates who went into a voting booth and let us down. Right? Very limited mentality people
yeah, yeah. You know what I think
let
about
us
that?
down.
It was the
Well,
billionaires that bought it. It has
well, they
nothing to
paid.
do with the idiots that voted. I mean,
Oh well, that's where we
you
differ.
know,
I
that's
think that
naive,
there's
John.
still no, 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 no,
It's the
no, no, no.
billionaires. They made
We'll
the
go.
decision.
Let's do a political one.
Citizens United changed the world.
Well, Citizens United changed the world
You know,
of
and
politics to the
it
point
makes
where they made
democracy just a quaint
no,
little word that doesn't
they
really
made
exist.
Citizens United made bribery legal, and all of us that
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
analyze it know that.
that's the result.
But
That's what we're
that's it.
living with here.
That's not what Michael.
Don't
We're going to
blame
go
those.
down the
Don't
rabbit.
blame my hillbilly neighbors who voted for the for.
It is the hill. I blame your hillbilly. Okay, that's where we. I blame your hillbilly neighbors.
Yeah,
None of my neighbors here are to blame. 94% of my neighbors voted to keep us free. All right,
yeah,
that's not
yeah.
the
And it
case.
worked, right? It worked.
That's not. No, it didn't. We
Yeah,
just didn't get enough hillbillies to understand they were voting against their own interest. Okay, and
yeah, yeah,
I mean, I grew up in a good, solid, rock rib, liberal Republican family filled with God believing, Bible believing Christians. Okay, and they weren't like this. All right, something happened. They weren't like this. Not
yeah.
the world I grew up in. They weren't like this. But I can't. I'm not ascribing the rise of this horror to God's will. You know what? That's what they're doing. They're
Right.
ascribing the rise of this criminal individual to God's plan. They say it's all part of God's plan. We've got an ambassador to Israel that's waiting for the last days, the end times to come, and the on the fields of Megiddo, and for something to come out of a cloud and take people up in the. I mean, we live in a world where it's gone almost massively on a global scale gone just more than a little bit insane. And what we're trying to talk about in our world, and I think we need to get maybe before we both go down the rabbit hole completely, in the world of recovery, in the world of sobriety, the atheist takes responsibility and uh, uh, and has efficacy and has ability to act on their own. It's our choice.
Yeah, our responsibility.
It's our choice and our responsibility, and we know that. And I think for us, when we stand up with that, there's some, mysterious psychological and mental. I'm not going to oversimplify, the condition of alcoholism and addiction. There's a lot of factors that go into it. But in my experience, over the many years I've been involved, uh, I know for a fact that it was my finally taking personal responsibility for my drinking that enabled me to stop.
There you go. Exactly. Yep.
That's the only thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the magic thing. I'm certain I would have been gone years ago if I'd continued upon the path I was when I was age 38. I
Yeah.
doubt seriously if I would have seen age 48, right? And I see the tragic results of our lack of ability to get our fingers and hands around this problem all the time. My wife and I were out at a favorite place we go to. There's an old time diner left in Bethesda. There's one old time great place left in Bethesda, and they, playing music from the 50s, and it's the real deal, though. That place has been there since 1946. Tasty Diner. I highly recommend it to anybody who finds themselves in Bethesda, Maryland. Go to the Tasty Diner, get yourself some good grub. But we were sitting in there last night, and there were lonely alcoholics dining alone on the counter tables. And one of them appeared to be an extremely dangerous individual. And none of these people were people that had other options in life. Okay, I could tell from the way they were presenting themselves. But you can see the alcoholics, they're everywhere. And the fact that whatever choices they've made have brought them to a state where their lives are virtually ruined makes you even more determined when you see that result could have been mine. That's something when I see it, I see in the real world that result could have been mine, and it
Right.
wasn't. And it wasn't.
Right.
Uh, as an atheist, we see our best life as our real life that hasn't been devised by someone else. You go to these other programs and listen to their stuff or listen to whatever they say. They say, oh, well, it was the grace of God brought me. What? What? What is that? What happens when the grace of God lets you down at midnight one night? Okay? I've seen a lot of people who are devoutly religious get drunk over and over and over again.
Well, God was away on vacation and skipped that day. Yeah. So, but we do depend on ideals, and that's what religion does for a lot of
Oh,
people. It presents an ideal for them, even if it's obviously impractical. But so where do our ideals come from as atheists? Where do we find the
well,
ideal that we're striving for?
ideals in the sense of, in my case, I've had a rich life in the study of literature which led me to an understanding, a deeper understanding of human psychology, as well as human pathology, and the lessons that I was given as a child, which were most certainly of the practical variety. Okay. You don't do bad things to people. You don't harm people gratuitously. As we say, you don't steal from them. Okay. What I've been able to read and see and understand as an atheist has led me to a moral framework that is consistent with reality, but also consistent with humanity.
Mhm.
Okay. If you take a mechanistic view of the world and twist it, you can end up with a deadly reality, every bit as deadly as taking a religious view and twisting it, right? You could conceivably, as an atheist, like some of the Bolsheviks, for example, which we talked about before. I'm a leftist, but not a Bolshevik. Twist the mechanics of your understanding of what history is and twist your idea of your understanding of what capitalism is, for example, and turn it into a justification for uh, uh, perpetrating evil acts. That's happened. All right. It happened in Russia. Uh, it happened in Cambodia for sure. It happened in China during the that glorious People's Revolution they had, and the Mao's counter-revolutionary activities back in the 60s. It happened in a lot of places, all right, by atheists, not to mention the other places where it's happened in fascist regimes like Spain, for example. Spain's a good example. Spain was it was at one time, not as much any longer, but they're still there, devoutly Catholic place where the Catholic Church was totally complicit in Franco's suppression of a people's rebellion and hundreds of thousands of dead there. Um, that's happened too on that side. Happened in other places like Argentina, happened in Brazil, happened many places around the world where certain religions were twisted. But the thing is, the thing closest to an atheist religion was, uh, Marxist Leninism and Bolshevism, right? Where atheism was like a tenet of that. And I'm not devoid of an understanding of history where I see them taking dialectical materialism and twisting it into an ideology that justified murder, right?
Right, right.
And there is, in my view, as an atheist, there is no practical justification for mass killing. There isn't, because I see the world as a place where the value of the human life is paramount, not because of a dogma or a religion, but because of my understanding of how valuable life is. And I achieve that understanding by an understanding of art and literature, poetry, novels, paintings, uh, great works of human self-engineering that put the paramount value on the human being. Okay.
Yeah.
Even to the extent that, well, I mean, if Van Gogh didn't have a good brother, we wouldn't know who Van Gogh was.
Mhm.
the real angel in that story is Theo, the brother, right?
Right, right.
Because he loved Vincent van Gogh, and he made sure that there was a Vincent van Gogh for us to see, not some crazy man who had things discarded along the way, which is what that society had a tendency to do. That's an expression of love that I learned from art, where I'd say, well, that guy was really loved. That's why I get to see these incredible works, because there was someone that cared for him in that kind of way. And bizarrely enough, I learned from that. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I mean, I read, as a
yeah,
young person, I read William Faulkner cover to cover, and there's a lot of brutal things in in Faulkner's world, in that world he constructed in Mississippi out of the reality of his situation in northern Mississippi. And but what's paramount, what comes through, what rings through in all of that is the strength and the value of the human being and what a human being is worth
yeah.
in the end.
We find our values and our ideals through the positive actions of humans.
And we see even in the world of art, like Jay Gatsby, who destroys himself, right? And disappoints everyone around him through his adherence to false dreams.
Yeah,
He teaches you about false dreams. In our case, at least I know in my case, I spent years chasing false dreams, sitting in bars with my vision of a bohemian world that was basically, a haven for alcoholics
yeah, yeah.
and intellectual alcoholics. It was a justification for,
Right.
you know, e- educated ones. Okay. And then almost my fake ideas about that stuff almost killed me. But I still love all those old boho writers that brought me along to begin with. The Ginsberg and Ferlinghetti and Corso, and even some of the more obscure people that came out of the woodwork in those days, many of whom didn't survive because of their bad habits.
Yeah,
So
in some respects, again, it's a scientific method. There's trial and error, and we see when it works and when it doesn't work. We see the reality of sobriety versus being drunk.
right,
I
and
mean,
and
it's pretty simple way of looking at it.
we see the mystery of life in real terms. Okay,
Yeah,
why did Weldon Keys 70 years ago jump off the Golden Gate Bridge and take one of the great poets of his generation away before his time? I wish I knew. Okay, life's filled with a lot of things that I don't fully understand, but I don't think that Weldon Keys jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge because it was God's will. I think there was something wrong with Weldon Keys, all
yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah.
that I don't understand quite yet. Why
Or the
someone
fact that
that
all the people who didn't jump off the Golden
who
Gate
didn't
Bridge.
jump, okay? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that
Yeah,
couldn't
yeah,
jump
yeah,
who didn't jump and who lived to very old age. It's
yeah,
like William de Kooning was got to be kind of elderly, and he hung out with a lot of suicidal drinkers in the Cedar Tavern, as I recall,
yeah.
way
There you
back
go.
when.
Yeah,
And there's a positive and the negative parts of the story. Okay, uh, but at least we're operating in positive and negative terms in a real world, not a world that was made up. Now, some of the things that we learned from were made up, like some fictional scenarios were made up, but the emotions and the ideas
yeah,
and the,
yeah,
the value on human life, that wasn't made up. That came from a human being sitting, probably with a hangover in a lot of cases, sitting, writing this stuff down and giving us some idea of what humanity can and would be.
yeah. Much of mythology is based on trial and error and examples to show us.
Yeah, and that brings us to one of the points I kind of outlined. I'll sort of go back to this thing I said. And one of those points I came up with this. I don't know how well I put it. We'll see. I said, by defining life by ourselves, for ourselves, as a foundation for realistic assessment, we feel that this allows for the incorporation of the solid values and ideals of others who bring insights into the real world in a real way that makes sense to us. We can, we think, then assess differences more realistically and adapt in our relations to others to their individual personal sensitivities and learn from the strengths and weaknesses of our closest friends and partners in a way that does not firmly apply outside structures and preconceptions to our closest relationships. There's a great freedom in this that believers often do not have. What in the hell am I trying to say
Yeah.
here?
Okay. First of all, what outside structures? Why not? Why not outside structures?
Well,
Learn
outside,
from the strengths and weaknesses of outside. I mean, for
outside,
me,
outside structure.
it's still just it's as simple as trial and error, and we see
Right,
that the
right,
trials that people go through, the tribulations, and the errors they make, the mistakes they make, and the successes that result from some of
right,
those attempts at
right,
behavior. So it's
right.
pretty simple. I mean, we see what works and what doesn't work.
Correct. But we live in a world filled with people that think it doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
And we
we
live in
do.
a world filled with people trying to help other recovering people by telling them things that are untrue. And it's
Such
my,
as,
such as that there is an outside power that if you take it into your system of belief will help you get and stay sober. That is totally and utterly fallacious unless you buy in and believe it, you see. If you totally bought in and believed something like that, I think we've seen a lot of examples of people that buy into that, who swear that the power greater than themselves has relieved them of the desire to drink. I mean, the desire to drink was relieved me of the desire to drink. What relieved me of the desire? Was there anything in the universe outside of the chemical reactions going on in my brain that led me to my first drink and also led me to my last? Was there anything that was going on in the real world outside this brain? Not a fucking thing. Not one fucking thing outside was was incorporating all of the information that I needed to start my disorderly life and then end it. All right. If I believed, I suppose that these things are so painful that they tell me, I've had people very close to me say, you have no respect for people of faith. Well, yeah, you're right. When you come right down to it, I don't, I have respect for you as a person, as an individual. I value you as a human being, but I have no respect whatsoever for this crap that you believe about something coming from the outside and changing or influencing things. That's fucking ridiculous. Okay, I'm sorry.
people need a way to explain things that they don't understand, and they find comfort in the simplicity of that. Just handing it off, handing the explanation off to something other than them instead of taking the responsibility and giving yourself some credit too. I mean, take some
Well,
credit
that's
for
true. That's
positive
true.
positive decisions.
That's very true. Uh, I was pretty successful in life, uh, but I know I've alluded to this before. And, you know, many years sober with two wonderful children and a bad marriage. And it wasn't until I was 57 years old that I figured out what a real partnership meant. And that realization, it wasn't just a realization that came about as a result of sobriety. It was a realization that came about from mistakes I made both before and after I was sober. And little by little, year by year, was beginning to figure out that I wasn't handling myself and comporting myself in a way that led to long-term stable commitment with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
But when I finally figured that out, and I was living with someone who absolutely demanded my, she's she looks sweet, but she's a very, very tough person, very tough person. And I had to confront what I was doing right and what I was doing wrong as far as my intimate and most personal relations. And I think in the end, I got it right, because we're going to have 20 years of very happy life together next January 22nd, if I
Wow.
live to do that.
Congratulations.
That'll be
Yeah.
20 years. Yep. Hopefully we're going to go to Madrid and sit in a nice place and have a little winter break and celebrate together what we were able to build. But I
That's a
know that
result of practical, rational, changing
thinking,
your behavior based
behavior,
upon
and
trial and
thinking.
error. That you learned from the mistakes you've made, and you depend on yourself to be responsible for the decisions you make. It's
You,
not something from outside of you.
no, you can reach a level of honesty that is astonishing. All right.
There you go.
And we're getting to the point where we may be well, not maybe, we have to conclude this. But we're saying in some, I think, that atheism in and of itself, as we've said in the past, is a positive, not a negative value,
Yeah,
because we
it's
can
it's not
point
a
to
lack of
how.
it's not a lack of something.
No, it's a realistic way to appropriate the reality of the world into a more positive way of living. Okay? For us. And we hope maybe that we've given some examples and talked about this a little bit
Yeah,
and allowed some of our listeners, if they're so inclined, to maybe get a little slightly different perspective on what the word atheism means as it is incorporated into our
yeah,
day-to-day personal lives.
yeah. I think
And we're
we've presented an example, a couple of examples of how atheism enhances our sobriety.
right. And I think then in that case, maybe we've been successful in this episode. Maybe somebody will tell us
Yeah,
in an email whether we have or we haven't. We'll see. And we invite everybody to do that if they like. There are links to get a hold of us, and there are ways to see us both on our Buzzsprout feed, which most of you get, and also on YouTube. And we've gotten to the stage where we're going to have to, wish everybody a fair adieu and hope that we've imparted some of that famous word that Michael likes to use.
yeah. I think we've expressed a little sense of hope that
Correct.
that
Correct.
based upon our experience, and because of that, we wish everyone peace and love.
Absolutely. Peace and love, not just today, but tomorrow and every day. God, I'm sounding evangelical here at the end. Peace and love, not just today, but tomorrow and every day, brothers and sisters, right? My brother Michael, my brother from Indiana, my brother. Peace and love. We'll see you all soon. Hope it was okay for you. Think it was okay for us. And we'll say, have a good day, night, weekend, or wherever the hell you're going to in
Yep.
the near future.
Peace and love.
Peace and love.